2025 Fantasy Football QB Sleepers, Justin Fields, Dak Prescott, and more. Some players have become absolute staples in my 2025 fantasy football drafts, and I can't seem to stop picking them year after year. But here's where it gets controversial. Are these picks truly the best, or have I fallen into a comfort zone? Let's dive into my personal must-draft list so far, with plenty of insights and a few bold opinions thrown in. And this is the part most people miss. I'll revisit these choices in August to see which players stay hot or cool off as the season approaches, when draft values shift. Quarterbacks Justin Fields, NYJ. The primary concern with Fields is his injury risk, something fantasy players have been wary of for a while. But here's a fascinating fact. Fields doesn't need to excel as a passer to dominate your fantasy scoreboard. In 2 standout games last year, where he scored over 23 fantasy points, he combined for just 1 passing touchdown. Back in 2022, Fields ranked 6th overall and 5th in fantasy points per game among quarterbacks. Despite modest passing numbers, only 2,242 yards and 17 touchdowns across 15 games. While I'm not expecting him to run for more than 1,100 yards again, achieving 900-plus rushing yards with a full season is highly probable, which could firmly place Fields in the top 10 fantasy QBs, possibly even higher. Dak Prescott Dal. Unlike Fields, Prescott relies mostly on his passing to deliver fantasy points. Last year was rough for him, no doubt. However, the Cowboys' offense got a significant boost by adding George Pickens as the new number 2 receiver, replacing Brandon Cooks, who was underwhelming. Prescott has consistently thrown for 30-plus touchdowns and over 4,400 yards in his last 3 full seasons. Considering Prescott's draft cost is coming down, I see a great value pick emerging here. Running backs Christian McCaffrey, SF. You're faced with a classic risk versus reward scenario here. McCaffrey carries some injury concerns, but if he stays healthy, his potential to be the top running back and arguably the best player in fantasy is unmatched. His ceiling could be 1 to 3 fantasy points per game higher than even the next best RB, which is massive at this position. Kenneth Walker. C. I was initially skeptical about Walker this year, expecting a role similar to what we saw in Pittsburgh with rotating backs. Zach Charbonnet played well in Walker's absence last year, which made me think Walker's touches could be limited. But after chatting with Seahawks analyst Michael Sean Dugar, I'm convinced Walker will play a bell cow role, which means a heavy workload and RB1 upside. Trevion Henderson. Here's a stat that's surprising. In the last decade, only James White became an RB1 with fewer than 200 touches. Henderson is projected to have a similar touch count, maybe a bit more, which means he won't be a top-tier RB1, but is definitely a solid RB2 option. Depending on your league, a very valuable asset. Cam Skattebo, NYG. Tyrone Tracy has been a good find, but isn't an all-around runner and has fumble issues. Skattebo is expected to share touches with Tracy, forming a 1A, 1B backfield split. I predict Skattebo will have around 200 to 250 touches, including receiving work, which often goes unnoticed but boosts his fantasy value. J.K. Dobbins. The buzz is around rookie R.J. Harvey for this backfield's upside. However, if Harvey stumbles or gets injured, Dobbins could emerge as the lead. He's a low-cost pick with RB2 potential if he inherits the primary role. Nick Chubb. How? I used to dislike Joe Mixon's prospects here because the team added Chubb and Woody Marks, which muddies the backfield. Like Dobbins, Chubb is more of a value-based pick. You could see him as an RB2 for half the season. But there's a genuine question mark if Mixon either sits out 2025 or returns less effective. Jordan Mason. Min. Mason was on my radar even before Vikings coach Kevin O'Connell praised him. The Vikings backs haven't been great finishers in the red zone, but Mason could share the workload with Aaron Jones in a timeshare setting. If Jones misses time, Mason has the potential for top 20 RB numbers, which makes him a tempting RB3 for fantasy teams that lean heavily on wide receivers. DJ Giddens. Don't make me say I told you so again. I've compared Giddens to David Montgomery before, And now Colts head coach Shane Steichen has confirmed he's the backup to Jonathan Taylor. With Taylor's injury history, Giddens is a smart handcuff pick who could produce if called upon. Wide receivers: Amon-Ra St. Brown, Det. I've taken St. Brown as high as the mid-first round in several drafts. Over the past 3 seasons, he's been targeted an astonishing 141 to 164 times per year. Some argue his touchdown numbers will drop, but I believe his yards per reception could bounce back, keeping his overall value high. Plus, his consistently high target volume offers an impressive safety net rarely seen outside the elite trio of Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and CeeDee Lamb. Xavier Worthy, KC. I had my sights on Worthy even before Rashee Rice's suspension rumors resurfaced. Both receivers finished last season similarly, and with Rice potentially missing 6+ games, Worthy could emerge as a high-upside WR2 option, especially if Travis Kelce's target share dips. Calvin Ridley, 10. Here's a quick snapshot of Ridley's recent performance. 64 receptions, 1,017 yards, 4 touchdowns on 120 targets, with only 7 red zone targets and just 1 end zone target. Despite playing for average quarterbacks like Malik Willis and Will Levis, Ridley clearly deserves attention as a consistent fantasy contributor. Chris Godwin, TB. Injury concerns surround Godwin, but there's no injury clause in his new contract, signaling the Bucs' confidence in his health and production. With Emeka Egbuka lurking behind and Mike Evans aging, Godwin is poised for a valuable role, offering solid WR3 upside at a reasonable cost. Chris Olave, NO. The Saints' quarterback situation leaves much to be desired, but even a struggling QB can deliver WR2 numbers from the team's top receiver. Olave's concussion history is worrisome, yet his price remains closer to a mid-range WR3 despite a recent top 25 fantasy finish. Matthew Golden, GB. Golden might become the replacement for what the Packers envisioned with Christian Watson. If only Watson could stay healthy. Golden has the chance to lead the Packers' receiving corps immediately. With 100 to 110 targets, 60+ receptions, over 1,000 yards. Master your fantasy football draft, proven strategies for 2020's live success. As the excitement of a new fantasy football season approaches, it's crucial to recognize that if you've been out of the loop since February's Super Bowl, you have quite a bit of ground to cover. The 2025 NFL offseason has been bustling with activity, leading to significant shifts in the fantasy football landscape. For instance, rookie running backs are making waves, with Ashton Genty emerging as a potential first-round fantasy pick. Additionally, the dynamic duo of Davante Adams and Matthew Stafford is set to electrify the Los Angeles offense, while the unexpected retirement of Derek Carr and the relocation of several prominent quarterbacks, including Justin Fields, Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, Aaron Rodgers, and Russell Wilson, have reshaped team strategies. In this first part of the playbook, we will delve into a comprehensive, position-by-position analysis of the current fantasy football environment, providing insights and strategies to help you make informed choices on draft day. While the primary focus will be on standard redraft leagues, I will also touch upon more specialized formats like Dynasty, Keeper, Superflex, and Best Ball, which will be explored in greater detail in the second part of this series. This guide serves as a strategic resource for both novice and seasoned players, drawing from my extensive experience as a fantasy football enthusiast and the research I've conducted during the off-season. Although I first published a version of this series back in 2021, it has evolved significantly over the years, reflecting the ever-changing nature of the game. Current position overview. Quarterback, the Elite Four. Last season, the top 4 quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Jaden Daniels, dominated the fantasy landscape, averaging impressive points per game. The key differentiator for these players compared to others like Joe Burrow and Baker Mayfield is their exceptional rushing ability. While Burrow and Mayfield managed a combined total of 579 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns, The Big Four averaged a staggering 741.8 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns, with none of them falling below 531 yards or 6 touchdowns. The quarterback position has transformed. Merely excelling in passing statistics is no longer sufficient. To compete with true dual-threat quarterbacks, players must be elite in both passing and rushing. Burrow and Mayfield, while still solid options, require extraordinary passing touchdowns to keep pace with the Big Four, which is a challenging feat given the historical rarity of quarterbacks achieving 40 or more passing touchdowns multiple times. While Burrow and Mayfield are reliable mid-tier QB1s, they are not the only options. Other notable quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, Bo Nix, Kyler Murray, and Brock Purdy are also in the mix, along with emerging talents such as Caleb Williams, Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott, and the dual-threat Justin Fields. Additionally, breakout candidates like Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, Cameron Ward, and Michael Penix Jr. are worth keeping an eye on. Given the significant drop-off in talent after the Big Four, I am inclined to invest in a top-tier quarterback this year, which typically requires a third or fourth round pick. This is a shift from previous years when elite quarterbacks like Allen were often first-round selections. The fantasy community has become more astute, and casual drafters are catching on, making the current draft costs for Allen, Jackson, Daniels, and Hurts more reasonable. Key takeaway: if you miss out on one of the Big Four quarterbacks, don't rush to fill the position. Instead, consider waiting until later in the draft. Shao, running back, invest or embrace youth. While wide receivers have taken precedence in fantasy football, securing impactful running backs remains vital. The promising 2025 rookie running back class is expected to make a significant impact, and we may also witness the decline of several veteran backs. Over the past 5 years, the average age of a top 15 fantasy running back has hovered around 25.1 years, peaking at 25.9 in 2022 and dipping to 24.1 in 2020. Notably, only a small fraction of running backs, about 9.3%, were 29 or older at the start of the season, although several older backs performed well last season, including Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara. We might see a regression in 2025. This raises an important question. Can we still rely on these seasoned veterans who have consistently delivered strong performances, or should we lean towards younger, emerging talents? Last season, targeting younger running backs proved successful, with players like Bijan Robinson, Kyren Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook, and Devon Achane making significant contributions. This year, we can also look to Bucky Irving, Kenneth Walker III, Chase Brown, and Breece Hall as potential breakout candidates. For those who subscribe to the Zero RB strategy, where you prioritize wide receivers and perhaps an elite tight end or quarterback in the early rounds, this year presents a great opportunity to capitalize on young running backs in the middle rounds. However, if you neglect to draft a running back early, you may find yourself feeling uneasy about your RB2 position as the season begins, especially given the high injury rates associated with the position. Key takeaway: if you have the chance to draft an elite running back early, do so, but don't force it if the value isn't there. Focus on other positions early and target promising young running backs in the middle rounds. #wide receiver, a few stars amidst a sea of WR3s. The wide receiver position has become somewhat top-heavy, with a select few superstars like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua, Malik Neighbors, and Amon-Ra St. Brown leading the charge. Each of these players is expected to command a significant target share, making them first-round picks in 12-team leagues. However, the landscape becomes murkier beyond this elite group, with teams increasingly utilizing 3 or more wide receiver sets, 73% of pass plays in 2024. There are numerous respectable options for your WR1 slot, including Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr., A.J. Brown, and Drake London. Yet, the risk increases as you venture further down the list. as the drop-off in talent isn't as pronounced. Questions abound regarding players like Tyreek Hill, who is now 31, and Devontae Adams, who is 32. Will they maintain their production? Can Rashee Rice thrive alongside Xavier Worthy in Kansas City? How will Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp perform with Sam Darnold in Seattle? The uncertainty surrounding these players creates a complex decision-making environment for drafters. Despite the challenges, the good news is that many of these receivers are expected to deliver starting-caliber production. With so much depth at the position, you can afford to monitor your draft and capitalize on large tiers of similar players. Late-round picks could yield players who emerge as WR3 options as early as Week 1, such as veterans Kupp, Stephon Diggs, and Michael Pittman Jr., alongside potential breakout candidates like Matthew Golden, Ricky Pearsall, and Keon Coleman. To navigate this crowded field, it's essential to focus on historical trends. Over the past 5 seasons, a staggering 86% of the top 50 wide receivers in fantasy points per game were selected in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. This trend underscores the importance of targeting players who have been recognized for their potential by NFL scouts. Additionally, second-year receivers who performed well as rookies tend to repeat their success. Since 2000, 71% of wide receivers who finished in the top 30 in fantasy points as rookies have done so again in their second year. This high success rate is worth noting, especially for players like Harrison, Thomas, Neighbors, and Ladd McConkey, who were top 30 finishers last season. Conversely, targeting second-year receivers who struggled as rookies can be a gamble. If a wide receiver fails to finish in the top 90 in fantasy points, history suggests they are unlikely to succeed in subsequent seasons. This trend is evident in players like Adonai Mitchell, Luke McCaffrey, and Jermaine Burton, who finished outside the top 90 in their rookie campaigns. Key takeaway: aim to secure a star receiver early. But with the depth available, there's no need to force a pick. Focus on players with a strong draft pedigree and those who have shown promise in their early careers. Tight end, a year to invest. Every year, there's hope that the tight end position will be filled with viable starters, yet disappointment often follows. This season, I recommend prioritizing tight ends early, particularly Brock Bowers or Trey McBride, who both excelled last season. Bowers and McBride not only ranked highly among tight ends, but also performed well against top wide receivers, making them worthy of consideration in the second or third round of your draft. The only hesitation in selecting them comes from the availability of George Kittle, who had a strong season and may be available a round or 2 later. If you miss out on these top options, Sam Laporta in the 6th round is also a solid choice, along with TJ Hawkinson a round later. Beyond that, the tight end landscape becomes murky, with players like David Njoku facing quarterback uncertainties and veterans like Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews experiencing increased competition for targets. Given the uncertainty surrounding many tight ends, it may be wise to avoid the position unless you can secure one of the elite options early. If you miss out on the top tier, it's often better to wait until the middle to late rounds to draft a tight end. Key takeaway: this is the year to prioritize acquiring an elite tight end. If you miss out on the top options, it's best to hold off on drafting one until later rounds. Defense, special teams. When it comes to defense and special teams, the mantra remains: if you're not streaming, you're not striving. Just as you adjust your expectations for offensive players based on defensive matchups, the same logic applies to your DST decisions. Focus on streaming defenses in favorable matchups to maximize your points. Kicker. The same approach. Daniel Carlson was the top kicker in fantasy for 2 consecutive years, but that doesn't mean you should reach for him in your draft. The history of kickers shows that the top scorer often doesn't repeat their success the following season. Therefore, it's advisable to wait until the final round to select a kicker, or even avoid drafting one altogether until just before the season starts. Final thoughts. As you prepare for the 2025 fantasy football season, it's essential to have a clear understanding of the player pool and your league settings. When it comes to your first pick, the trend has shifted from running backs dominating the early rounds to a more balanced approach that includes elite wide receivers. The key is to remain flexible and adapt your strategy based on your draft position. If you have the first overall pick, selecting Jamar Chase is a solid choice, even if he doesn't replicate his record-breaking 2024 season. Following him, you can consider a range of elite players, including Robinson, Jefferson, Lamb, and others. The depth at both running back and wide receiver means there's no wrong answer when deciding between the two positions in the first round. As you navigate the middle rounds, keep an eye on value picks, even if they don't align with your immediate positional needs. History shows that drafting reliable players can lead to success, especially when injuries strike later in the season. Ultimately, your goal should be to assemble a talented roster that can withstand the ups and downs of the season. Ready to sharpen your drafting skills? Dive into our mock draft lobby for a free practice draft with other users. Top fantasy football sleepers and flyers for 2025 late round draft picks. Imagine this. You've drafted your fantasy football team and you're ready to dominate the season. But here's where it gets controversial. The best season-long fantasy football players are always on the lookout for hidden gems and are ready to make changes to their roster. This is especially true in the early part of the season, when roles and performances are still being defined. With that in mind, it's crucial to prioritize players with high potential over those with proven track records when making your later round picks. If things don't work out, you can always drop them for the high-quality options that will inevitably hit the waiver wire come September. And this is the part most people miss. This strategy is very different from best ball, where you're stuck with your picks for the entire season. So, let's dive into some of my favorite targets with a home league average draft position, ADP, of 120.0 or later as of August 1st. The ADP I'm using is a combination of Yahoo, Sleeper, and RT Sports half PPR ADP. Note that some players I like, such as Jaden Reed, Justin Fields, Justin Herbert, Jacoby Myers, Ricky Pearsall, Tyler Warren, and Matthew Golden, are too high in the draft to be considered true sleepers. These players are listed in ADP order, but please consult your league-specific draft applet to understand more about where they will go. 1. Drake May, QB, Patriots. ADP 127.3. May had an impressive rookie season, averaging 16.8 fantasy points per game over 11 games. And I could argue he dealt with the NFL's worst offensive line and the worst skill position core. Those units are far from great now, but they are vastly improved. The Patriots added Stephon Diggs in free agency, plus Tre'Veyon Henderson and Kyle Williams in the draft. They also used the number 4 overall pick on LT Will Campbell, the number 69 overall. An uptick in passing volume/efficiency is likely with these new additions and a new Josh McDaniels scheme. And we know he can run. May posted 54, 421, 2 rushing in those 11 rookie season games. 2. Emeka Egbuka, WR Buccaneers, ADP 129.0. The ability to add a high-upside wideout like Egbuka as a later-round bench piece is what makes me want to draft RBs and 2B early. The Bucs used the 19th overall pick on Egbuka despite having Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Jalen McMillan. Note that Godwin's dislocated ankle continues to give him issues. Evans is 32 years old, and McMillan's underlying rookie metrics were fine, but not spectacular. There are just so many ways Egbuka can earn a big role in one of the NFL's most WR-friendly offenses. I expect new OC Josh Grizzard to run the same system he learned from Liam Cohen. Our Fantasy Football Draft Kit Pro, establishtheRun.com/subscribe, was created to prepare you with the highest quality resources to help you win your league. Our team of analysts, led by Evan Silver and Adam Levitan, create unmatched content and rankings to make sure you're ready for draft day. While our draft kit is built for competitive fantasy players, we've made it fun and easy to consume. If you aren't satisfied with our draft kit for any reason, just email us within 48 hours of purchase and we'll provide a full refund. Full draft kit overview, establishtherun.com/subscribe. Already a subscriber? Log in. Establishtherun.com, /login.php, redirect to https to establishtherun.com/levitan-favorite flyers, sleepers, 2. But here's a thought-provoking question for you. Do you think prioritizing upside over proven performance in later rounds is a risky strategy? Or is it the key to winning your fantasy football league? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.